just a mock-up. You're acting like I burned down a hospital." That was my brother, standing in the doorway of my home office, watching me stare at a blank screen where 3 years of work used to be. He said it, the way people say things when they already know they're wrong but refuse to admit it. Casual, dismissive, like the words cost him nothing, because for him, they didn't. "My name is Kyle Brennan, and that was the moment I decided I was done. Let me back up. I'm a UX designer, not the kind who makes buttons pretty. The kind who spends 18 months studying how a person's eye moves across a screen. What makes them trust a product? What makes them close a tab forever? The kind of work that looks invisible when it's done right." My portfolio was the result of 3 years of that invisible work. Case studies, wireframes, interaction flows, research documentation for a healthcare platform I'd been contracted to redesign. A $6 million contract that was supposed to close on a Tuesday. The folder was named simply Medflow Final. It lived on the shared family NAS drive, a home network storage device my brother had set up 2 years ago when we were still on speaking terms about things like that. It was supposed to be partitioned. My section, his section. He swore he understood the structure. He didn't. He was cleaning up what he called dead files. Old project folders that were just taking up space. He deleted 34 gigabytes that Saturday afternoon without asking a single person. Then he came to find me to mention it, almost as an afterthought, the way you might tell someone you threw away their mail. "I freed up space on the NAS. You can thank me later." I looked at him. "What did you delete?" "Just old stuff. Folders that hadn't been touched in a while." I was already moving toward my desk, already opening the drive, already seeing the empty space where Medflow Final used to sit. I asked him 3 times to confirm what he'd deleted. He said it 3 different ways, but the answer was the same every time. Everything was gone. My parents were in the living room when I came out. My mother looked up from her phone. My father muted the TV. I told them what happened. I kept my voice steady. I explained the contract. I explained the timeline. I explained that I had a presentation in 4 days and the primary deliverables were gone. My father nodded slowly, then said, "Can't you just redo it?" My mother added, "You work on computers all day. Surely you have copies somewhere." And then my brother, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, said the thing he said. "It's just a mock-up. You're acting like I burned down a hospital." The room stayed quiet for a second. I looked at all 3 of them. My father had already turned the TV volume back up. My mother went back to her phone. My brother shrugged and walked to the kitchen. That was it. No apology. No offer to help. Nothing. I went back to my office and closed the door. I sat at my desk for a long time without touching anything. Outside, I could hear the TV. I could hear my brother opening the refrigerator. I could hear my mother laugh at something on her screen. I'd been living in my parents' house for 8 months. I'd moved back temporarily after my lease ended while I was deep in the Medflow contract, trying to save money, trying to finish the work without distraction. I'd paid rent every month, paid for groceries twice a week, fixed the Wi-Fi router, called the plumber when my mother didn't want to deal with it. I'd been useful in the way that people take for granted until it stops. I sat at that desk and I thought about all of it. The money I'd lent my brother when his freelance work dried up. The $3,200 I'd never seen again. The times I'd proofread his resume, helped him prep for interviews, talked him through his anxiety at midnight. I thought about what he'd just said. "It's just a mock-up." I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just got quiet in a way I'd never gotten quiet before. I opened my laptop. I opened a browser. And then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in almost 2 years. When I first started contracting seriously, a friend in IT security had drilled one concept into me repeatedly. He called it the cold start rule. Never let your only copy of critical work live in one place you don't personally control. I'd been careful about it for a while. I'd set up an automated sync to a private encrypted repository, a personal Git server I was hosting through a VPS provider I'd been paying $12 a month for since 2021. I'd set it to sync anytime I connected to my home network. I'd mostly forgotten about it because it ran silently in the background without ever asking for my attention. I hadn't checked it in 8 months. I opened the terminal on my laptop. I typed in the address. I entered the credentials I'd stored in my password manager. And there it was. Every commit, every iteration, every version of Medflow Final going back 14 months. The most recent sync was from the Thursday before the deletion. 3 days old. Not perfect, but close enough. I sat back. I exhaled. And I made a decision. I didn't say a word to anyone in that house. The next morning, I worked from a coffee shop 3 blocks away. I spent 6 hours reconstructing the 3 days of work I'd lost. It wasn't fun, but it was doable. By Sunday night, I had everything I needed for Tuesday's presentation. I ordered room service from a hotel I'd checked into that afternoon, spread my work across the desk, and slept better than I had in months. Tuesday, I walked into the Medflow presentation with a clean deck, a live prototype, and the kind of focus that only comes when there's no background noise. There were 5 people in the room. 2 of them I'd met before. The others were new. 1 from their legal team, 1 from the board. I started with the problem statement. I walked them through every design decision and why it was made. I showed the prototype working in real time, handed them each a tablet, let them interact with it directly. 40 minutes in, the board member leaned forward and asked me to go back to the patient intake flow. I did. She studied it for a moment. "Who else worked on this?" "Just me," I said. She looked at the lead I'd been working with, then back at me. "We've had this redesigned twice before by other firms. This is the first time it's made sense to someone who isn't already a nurse." The contract was extended on the spot. Not just closed, expanded. An additional phase, an additional $2.4 million, a 6-month timeline. The lead walked me to the elevator afterward and shook my hand for longer than necessary. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 15 minutes, not doing anything, just sitting. Then I drove to my parents' house, not because I wanted to be there, but because I still had things there. My brother was home. He was playing a game on the TV I'd helped him buy 2 years ago. He didn't look up when I came in. I went to my room. I packed what mattered. Laptop, hard drives, personal documents. The chair I'd bought because the one in the room hurt my back. I made 3 trips to my car. No one came to check what I was doing. On the 4th trip, I stopped in the living room. "I'm leaving," I said. I found an apartment. My mother looked up. "When did this happen?" "Just now, basically." My brother paused his game. "Because of the files thing?" "Because of a lot of things." My father said, "You don't need to make a big deal out of this." "I'm not making a big deal," I said. "I'm moving out. That's a normal thing." I left that night. The apartment was a sublet I'd found online that afternoon. Furnished, month to month, close to the clients I was working with. Not perfect. Clean enough. Mine. I slept on a stranger's couch cushions the first night because the bed frame wasn't assembled. It didn't bother me at all. The next morning I started what I privately called the reset. Not revenge, not at first. Just correction. I'd been subsidizing my family's life in ways I'd let become invisible. And I was done making them visible again by fighting about it. I was just going to stop. I canceled the shared streaming plan I'd been paying for. 3 accounts, $62 a month, 2 of which were my parents and my brother. I removed myself from the shared grocery delivery account. I logged out of the family cloud storage I'd been paying for since 2019. I called my phone carrier and separated my line from the family plan, which also removed the discount I'd been providing to 2 of the other lines. I did all of this in a single morning with no announcement. My brother texted first. "Netflix isn't working." I replied, "I canceled my subscription." He sent 3 more messages in quick succession. I didn't respond to any of them. Then I moved on to the harder part. My brother had been using my professional Adobe license to do his own freelance projects. He had his login credentials saved to 3 of his devices. I revoked access remotely and changed the password. He called me that night. "What did you do?" "My software isn't working. I revoked the shared access. I need the license for my own work." "Are you serious right now?" "I have a deadline." "I know how that feels," I said, and then I hung up. He called back twice. I didn't answer. 2 days later, my mother called. Not about the subscription or the license. She said she was calling to check in. which meant someone had told her to call and smooth things over. She asked how the new place was. I told her it was fine. She asked if I'd heard from my brother. I said yes. She asked if we were okay. I said we were figuring things out. Then she said the thing I've been waiting for someone to say for years. You have to understand, he didn't mean any harm. He was just trying to help. I'd heard that sentence, or a version of it, my entire life. He didn't mean any harm. He was just being him. You know how he is. You're more capable, so you have to be more patient. Mom, I said. I had a $6 million contract presentation 4 days after he deleted 3 years of my work. He said it was just a mock-up and walked away to get a snack. Silence. I'm not angry anymore, I continued. But I'm also not pretending that was fine. She didn't have an answer for that. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing. I told her I loved her. I meant it. I hung up. The calls from my father came a week later. He's not someone who calls to talk through feelings. He calls when there's a functional problem that needs to be addressed. He got right to the point. Your brother lost the Delmore account because of the Adobe thing. Delmore was one of the bigger clients my brother had managed to pull in. I didn't know the details of what happened. I didn't know the details of what happened. I didn't ask. He should get his own license, I said. It's $15 a month for a basic plan. That's not the point. That is actually exactly the point, Dad. He went quiet in that way he does when he wants you to feel guilty about being right. I waited him out. After a while, he said, you could have warned him. He could have asked before deleting my work. We can talk about courtesy all day. My father didn't respond to that directly. He said, this family doesn't fall apart over software. The family isn't falling apart, I said. I moved out. That's allowed. He cleared his throat. Your brother needs some help getting back on his feet. There it was. I'd been wondering how long it would take to get there. The framing always changed. This time it was the software, the lost account, getting back on his feet. But the ask was always the same. Help your brother. You're doing well. You can afford to carry him a little longer. I've been helping him for 6 years, I said. The $3,200 from 2021 is still sitting there. I've never once mentioned it. I'm mentioning it now. My father said, you kept track of that? Of course I kept track of it. Another silence. Then, quietly, what do you want, Kyle? An apology? A check? I want to not be the family ATM anymore. That's all. I don't need an apology. I don't need the money back. I just needed to stop. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He said he'd talk to my brother. I said okay. We said goodbye. That conversation cost me something. I don't know what exactly. Maybe just the hope that he'd surprise me. He didn't, but it was still fine. It was clean. I'd said the true thing instead of the agreeable thing, and I could live with that. I kept working. MedFlow moved into phase 2. I brought in a junior designer to help with the expanded timeline. A former classmate I trusted, and we built a small, actual working relationship from scratch. No family obligation. No history to manage. Just 2 people who respected each other's work. 3 weeks after I moved out, I got a message from a creative director I'd briefly worked with at a design studio 2 years prior. She'd seen a case study I'd published on my portfolio site, wanted to know if I was available for a short consulting engagement. I said yes. Then she asked if I'd be interested in a longer conversation about joining the studio as a partner-level hire. I went in for a coffee. The conversation lasted 3 hours. They weren't a huge shop, but they had good clients, good culture, and a design philosophy I actually believed in. The offer they put together was serious. Base salary, profit share, creative ownership over a specific vertical. I took 48 hours to think about it. I said yes. I signed the agreement on a Wednesday morning in my apartment at the kitchen table, with bad coffee and the window open, no ceremony, no one to tell. I sat with it for a while. Then I texted the news to 3 people, my junior designer, my IT security friend who told me about the cold start rule, and a college roommate who'd always believed I was better than I let myself be. Those were the right 3 people. My phone buzzed for the rest of the day. The studio posted a short announcement on LinkedIn. Within 24 hours, I had messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Former classmates, old colleagues, a professor who said she remembered my thesis, and then, buried in the notifications, a text from my brother. Saw the thing. Congrats, I guess. I stared at it for a while. I guess was doing a lot of work in that sentence. I didn't respond that day. I let it sit. The next morning I wrote back, thanks. One word. Sent it. Put the phone face down. My mother texted the same afternoon. A longer message. She said she was proud of me and that she always knew I'd figure it out and that she wished things were different. I read it twice. I believe she meant it. I wrote back something warm but short. I wasn't going to punish her. I also wasn't going to pretend the last few months hadn't happened. My father didn't message. That was fine too. That was him exactly as he'd always been. What I didn't expect was the voicemail from my brother 3 days later. He'd called while I was in a meeting and left something that ran almost 4 minutes. I listened to the whole thing walking around the block that evening. He talked about the Delmore account, about a few other things that hadn't been going well, about feeling like he was watching me pull ahead while he stayed in the same place. Somewhere toward the end, he said, I didn't think the files were important. I genuinely didn't. I know that's not an excuse. He was right that it wasn't an excuse. But it was the first honest thing he'd said to me in a long time, and I recognized it as such. I didn't call back that night. I sat on a bench outside my building and watched the street for a while. What I felt wasn't satisfaction. It was closer to the feeling you get after a long run, when your legs are done and you're not sure you could have pushed further, but you know you went far enough. I didn't need him to suffer. I'd never needed that. I just needed him to understand that his version of things wasn't the only version of things. A few days later, I replied with a voice note of my own. I kept it under 2 minutes. I said I heard him. I said I wasn't holding a grudge. I said I needed some distance to get my head right and figure out what kind of relationship we could have that was actually good for both of us. I said the door wasn't closed, but I needed it to stay at a distance for a while. He replied, okay, fair. 2 words. But the right 2 words. I still live in the sublet. I bought a proper bed frame eventually. Put up one print on the wall. A poster from a design exhibition I went to alone on a Tuesday night because I felt like it. Made coffee the way I like it. Kept the place quiet. I don't miss the noise. I didn't realize how much of my thinking space had been taken up by managing other people's problems until the space was mine again. Ideas move differently when there's room for them. The Medflow project ended in a write-up on a design publication I'd been reading since graduate school. A small mention, a few sentences, a link to my portfolio. Someone I'd never met emailed me to say it had influenced how they were approaching a project of their own. That email sat with me for a long time. This isn't a story about cutting off my family. It isn't even a story about revenge, not really. It's a story about what happens when you stop filling every available space with other people's needs and find out what you are actually building underneath all of it. I was 31 years old when my brother deleted my work and called it nothing. I'm 32 now. The gap between those 2 ages is the most useful 12 months of my life. My brother and I talked again recently. A real conversation, not just texts. We got coffee. It was a little formal, a little careful, the way things are when something real has happened and you're both trying to figure out the new normal. But it was honest. That's something. My parents are fine. My mother calls on Sundays. My father asks practical questions about work, and I answer them, and that's the extent of it, and we're both okay with that. The studio is going well. Better than well. I keep the cold start rule now like a reflex. 3 backups, 2 locations, 1 I control personally, but I've started applying the same logic everywhere, not just to files, to relationships, to commitments, to the ways I give my time and energy. Don't put everything critical in one place you don't personally control. Know where your backups live. Test them occasionally, and if someone calls what you built just a mock-up, let them. Just make sure you know where the real copy is stored. I've thought about that Saturday a lot, not obsessively, just the way you return to a scar sometimes. Not because it hurts anymore, but because you want to remember how it healed. My brother deleted 3 years of my work and called it nothing. My parents nodded along, and for about 20 minutes, I sat at my desk feeling like the floor had dropped out. But here's what I've come to understand about moments like that. They don't create the problem. They just make the problem impossible to ignore anymore. The real issue had been building for years. In every unpaid loan, every favor that was never returned, every time I made myself smaller so someone else wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. The deleted folder didn't break something. It just finally showed me what had already been broken for a long time. What happened after wasn't luck. The cold start rule backup existed because I'd chosen, years earlier, to take my own work seriously even when no one around me did. The contract expanded because I put in the kind of hours that don't show up on anyone's radar until suddenly they do. The studio partnership came because I'd been building a reputation quietly, without asking anyone's permission or waiting for anyone's approval. None of it fell from the sky. It was the accumulated result of showing up consistently for something I believed in, even when the people closest to me couldn't see the value in it. That's the thing about integrity. Not the word on a poster version, but the actual thing. It means you do the work the same way whether anyone's watching or not. It means you keep the backup running even when you've half forgotten about it. It means you don't compromise the quality of what you're building just because someone in the next room thinks it's just a mock-up. And over time, that consistency becomes the thing that saves you. Not dramatically, not all at once, just quietly at the exact moment you need it most. My brother is a smart person. That's what made it hard. He wasn't malicious. He just hadn't developed the habit of thinking carefully about consequences before he acted, of asking what something might mean to someone else before he decided it was unimportant. That's not a character flaw you're born with. It's one you grow out of, if you're willing to. I think he's starting to. The voicemail he left me wasn't comfortable to record. I could hear that. And I think doing something uncomfortable and honest, even quietly, even 4 minutes long on a voicemail no one else will hear, is how that growth actually starts. I'm not telling this story to prove I won something. I moved into a sublet with a bad bed frame and made coffee alone every morning, and it was genuinely fine. Winning isn't a feeling I associate with any of this. What I associate with it is clarity. The particular kind of clarity you get when you stop managing everyone else's reactions to your choices and just make the choices. You don't get that clarity by being ruthless. You get it by being honest about what you've built, what you're owed, what you're willing to keep carrying, and what you're finally ready to put down. Kyle Brennan figured that out at 31. Some people figure it out later. Some people never do. But the moment you stop waiting for the people around you to recognize your value and just start living like it's already true, that's when things actually change. The work was always real. It just needed room to prove it.